Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Body Donation Center turned into a human chop shop and saving our bodies for the future. Follow me down the rabbit hole to find out more. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the rabbit hole. I am your host, Danny, and today we are talking about two different topics, the human chop shop and cryonics. So I was just going to do the human chop shop, but that episode would have been like 10 minutes long, and then that would have been the end of it. So I decided to include a second topic that kind of go together. Both of them are kind of happening in Arizona. So I was like, yeah, sounds good. Let's do it. First things first, as always, thank you, Robert, for the suggestion. I love to thank you guys when you send in a suggestion because I have so many of them that I don't even have to think about topics anymore. Now it's just like, which topic do I choose to do? So thanks, Robert, for sending this in. Let's talk about body brokers. So a body broker is a firm or an individual that buys and sells cadavers and human body parts. The organ transplantation market is heavily regulated in the U.S., but the use of cadaver parts for research, training, and other things, whatever else, that's not very regulated at all. This is wild to me because there are so many laws about the disposal of corpses and how, like their treatment, but once a body is actually donated to science, there's basically like no oversight or regulations. They're like, do whatever you want with it. Which is nuts when you hear later on what they actually do with these bodies. Many brokers say they do charge a fee as opposed to like selling body parts. Just like how there are fees to adopt a baby, but you aren't buying a baby, same concept. In the 20th century, body snatching was a common way of acquiring bodies for research. We talked about this in the Project Sunshine episode where they would literally just like steal bodies, or they would like make an under the table deal with somebody at a hospital and be like, we'll take your bodies, which is kind of weird, but here we are. And I get it, like scientists, they need to figure things out. They need to study things. I understand that, but like body snatching? Anyway, body brokers obtain cadavers and body parts from institutions who receive donations and have too many bodies or body parts. So these institutions that receive the donations, like universities and hospitals, different places like that, they actually get donated the bodies. So when your body is donated to science, that's where it goes. When those places, they're like, we have so many bodies that we can't use all these. They give them to body brokers because that person that runs a body broker, they're supposed to be distributing those bodies to other places that would use them for scientific research or training or whatever. That's what's supposed to be happening. That's not always what is happening. In some cases, this, like giving away of a body is done illegally. And it goes against what the donor or the donor family actually wanted. So bodies are obtained under the pretenses of using them for research. When it's done illegally, they turn around and sell these bodies for profit. In 2004, the UCLA Willed Body Program was suspended for a year after a scheme for the sale of body parts for profit was uncovered. So this scheme involved the director of the program and a local body broker. They were like working in cahoots. So the director of the program would donate these extra bodies that he had to this body broker, and he would get like a cut back. And they made about $1.5 million just in profit. Both the body broker and the director of the program at UCLA were convicted of theft and tax-related offenses because they weren't paying money on the money they were stealing. And they were sentenced to 4 to 10 years. Usually when people give their loved ones' bodies or somebody decides to donate their body to science, they are offered a free cremation service. So families that cannot afford funeral costs sometimes opt for this option because it's the only way that they can preserve their loved one in some sort of way. Some body brokers are open and honest with the families as to what is actually happening with their loved ones' bodies, but that is not true for all the cases. Sometimes they're like, well, we're going to use it as we see fit. And just so you know, almost anyone, regardless of expertise, can dissect and sell human body parts. From what I can find, you don't need a special license to be a body broker. You do need to make sure that you have your business registered, that you're paying your taxes, all of that, as with any business, right? But tell me why you need a license to cut and color my hair, but not to cut up my loved one's body. Again, bananas. So the Biological Resource Center, BRC, in Phoenix, Arizona, was a for-profit body donation center. So they were body brokers, meaning they would acquire bodies through donation and they would sell them in different places that would need cadavers. Hospitals, universities, research, medical centers, training organizations, all these different places, and they would keep the profit. They would sell them to these different places that would need them. They promised to connect those that wished to donate their bodies to science with those that needed bodies for research. So they were like the middleman, basically. As with most body brokers, they promised to cremate the remains and give them back to the families. Not only that, but they would collect the body from wherever it was. So if your loved one passed away at the hospital, that's where the body was, they would go and get it from the hospital with no fee, or a coroner or a funeral home, wherever it was, for no cost. So they would collect the body, they would cremate it, no cost to the family. But there were some serious problems with this. In January of 2014, the FBI raided this facility in Phoenix because they got claims that they were selling donated body parts. Stephen Gore was obtaining bodies under false pretenses and committing fraud by claiming the donated bodies would be for medical research when it knew some of the remains would be sold for military testing, such as crashes and explosions. However, these bodies are supposed to be tested for diseases before being sold, and that was not happening. So employees of BRC were exposed to a whole slew of diseases like hepatitis B, hepatitis C, AIDS, tuberculosis, all kinds of things. If cadavers test positive for any disease, they are not eligible for donation. But in this case, Stephen Gore didn't care. He just accepted all the bodies because he was just reselling them. But he was telling people, I'm just the middleman. I'm going to get them to, the universities, the hospitals, places that actually need the cadavers. But in a lot of cases, he was actually selling them to the military. But because these cadavers were testing positive for these diseases, not only were the employees at BRC being exposed to these diseases, now these other people at these other facilities, the military facilities or the hospitals, maybe they were actually going to hospitals, some of them, I don't know. But these other people were now exposed to these diseases as well because they were exposed to these bodies. And not only that, they were doing some really weird things with these bodies and the body parts. So former FBI Assistant Special Agent Mark Quiner says they found buckets of heads and arms and legs in the building. They also found a cooler just full of penises and body parts piled on top of each other. These body parts had no identification, so you didn't know who they belonged to or where they should be going. No indication at all, basically. They even found a torso with its head removed, and it had been replaced with a different head. They know this because the torso appeared to be male, while the head appeared to be female, sort of like Frankenstein-esque. After this came out, another body broker offered his input as to why they may have been sewing different body parts together, that they may not have had like enough of one of the bodies to give the family enough ashes, so they used another body to kind of get more ashes. And this seems weird to me because, like, why would you need to sew the head onto the body? Like, can't you just put all the pieces in the cremation chamber and have them just all... It doesn't make sense as to why you would need to sew them together. But a torso with a head could sell for about $2,400. So that could have been why they did that. A leg would go for $1,100. Knees and feet would go for under $500. So they were dealing with the bodies in a way that was totally disrespectful. They're like putting heads on torsos that don't belong. They were just doing whatever they want. But remember, the regulations and the oversight is basically nothing, so they can do whatever they want to. Here are some of the stories that come out of this facility. So Jim Stauffer donated his mother's body to BRC in hopes that her brain could be studied and help in Alzheimer's research. So I'm assuming that she had Alzheimer's. I don't know for sure, but that makes the most sense. The facility detached one of her hands and cremated that for the family to have. Fine, you have some piece of your mom. Then they sold the rest of her body to the U.S. Army. The Army was conducting experiments on roadside bomb damage. Jim was horrified to know that his mother was blown up instead of used as he had consented to. Another situation, Steve Hansen's wife donated his body to science in hopes it would further alcohol research. Again, I'm assuming that he probably had an alcohol issue. I don't know if he died from that. Steve initially wanted to donate his organs, but they were not in good enough condition to be donated, so he and his wife instead opted for science donation. Jill, the wife, hoped scientists would study how alcohol affects the body. Steve's body was sold to the DoD instead. BRC was selling bodies to the DoD for around $6,000 a piece. In case you don't know, it's the Department of Defense, DoD, Department of Defense. Stephen Gore, the owner of BRC, pleaded guilty in 2015 for operating an illegal enterprise and was sentenced to 1 year deferred prison time and 4 years probation. That's it. That's all he got. This is nuts because another man who was in the same business doing it mostly legal got sentenced to 8 years in prison for falsifying medical records of some cadavers that he wanted to sell for transplant. Gore straight up contaminated people with diseases, was selling and abusing bodies, and only gets a year? He did have to pay the families of the cadavers about $58 million in punitive damages and compensation. The families say the bodies weren't treated with dignity and respect as stated on the forms they signed when donating their loved ones' bodies. So, I don't know, that's pretty messed up. I grew up in a conspiratorial-minded family, so when I was first getting my license and I chose, do I want to be an organ donor, do I not? I was basically told, if you are an organ donor, the medical professionals might keep you alive in order to keep your organs viable until they need to transplant them. So at first I was like, well, I don't want to be if I'm a vegetable, I don't want to be kept alive. So I don't know if that's necessarily happening. That was just, in the back of people's minds. But now it's been proven that donating your body to science isn't always what it seems. So obviously organ donation is regulated, but just how regulated is my question, I guess. And even if you donate your bodies to a hospital or a university, what's to say they won't turn around and give them to a body broker because they just have too many bodies? So if you were considering that, maybe this will make you think twice. As many of you can imagine, researching conspiracy theories every day can cause some uneasiness in my life. On top of that, my military career left me with some emotional scars. Whether you're dealing with the daily grind or just need to unwind after a long day, Calm with Kava helps you escape the chaos and find your inner peace. I tried it and it helped settle my thoughts and unwind at the end of the day. I also took some in the morning after having a nightmare to clear my head to get ready for the day. Kava, a traditional Polynesian root, has been known for centuries for its calming properties. And now, Calm with Kava brings this ancient secret to you in a delicious, ready-to-drink form. Made with natural ingredients, you know you'll be getting a pure and authentic experience. What's cool is it comes in a variety of flavors and it's non-alcoholic, so you can enjoy it anytime throughout the day. And Calm with Kava's starter kit is there to help listeners who want a bit of a guide to using it find their footing and feel comfortable. Visit calmwithkava.com/podcast and discover a range of flavors designed to soothe your mind and body. Use promo code RABBITHOLE10 at checkout for a special discount on your first order. That's KALM with KAVA.com/podcast and use code RABBITHOLE10 for your first Calm with Kava purchase.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
And since we're talking about dead bodies, I think that we should talk about saving your body for the future. So we're going to talk about cryonics. In 1972 in California, Fred and Linda Chamberlain started Alcor Life Extension Foundation. So Alcor is the world leader in cryonics research, and cryonics technology today. Cryonics is the practice of preserving life by pausing the dying process using sub-freezing temperatures with the intent of restoring good health with medical technology in the future. So like super sci-fi-y. In 1962, cryonics was first kind of brought to light by physics teacher and author Robert Ettinger in his book, The Prospect of Immortality. In 1972, Alcor was incorporated. They had about 5 members, but no patients. I looked and I actually called them to see if I was correct about this. So their members are people that will be frozen in the future, and the patients are who is actually frozen. So when you hear me talk about their members versus their patients, the patients are the people that are currently stored in their facility. They are not dead, but they are being stored for when they can come back. And the members are people that are currently living and will eventually be frozen and stored in their facility. That way, that makes a little more sense. In 1976, they performed their first human cryopreservation. So they got their initial funding from ManRise Corporation, and TransTime Incorporated stored their long-term patients, or like just their one patient that they had, because at that point they didn't even have the facility to store the patients. In the late 70s, they were conducting hypothermia experiments in which large animals were made to be deeply hypothermic for like 4 hours and then resurrected with no measurable neurological deficits. So that was like a huge win for them because they're like, look, we can do it and it'll all work out. So they developed a blood substitute for these experiments, which became the basis for the blood substitute solution used at Alcor. They also came up with the standby transport model for human cryonics cases with the goal of intervening immediately after cardiac arrest and minimizing injury. By 1986, they had 85 members and 5 patients. In 87, Alcor took over the care of Dr. James Bedford. He was the first person to be successfully cryopreserved, and he is still with Alcor. In 1994, Alcor moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. They were concerned about the vulnerability of California with like earthquakes and such, and Arizona had the lowest risk of natural disaster. In 2001, they adapted the cryoprotectant formulas, and it was a concentrated formula capable of achieving ice-free structural preservation of the human brain. So at the time, it couldn't be used for whole bodies, but they did get there by 2005. In 2015, they collaborated on research that proved memory can survive cryopreservation. I don't know how they did that, but that's kind of neat. In 2020, Alcor had long been the world leader in cryonics with the best available technology. They have over 180 patients and 1,300 members. The idea behind this is that embryos can be preserved, and they've been preserved for years at very low temperatures, and then they'll be thawed out and used to make babies, right? And even humans have been cold, and they were presumed dead, but it was just the body's defense mechanism slowing down the organs and the heart and all that. That's where the saying, they're not dead until they're warm and dead comes from, because if somebody's hypothermic, then they could be presenting dead, but it could be just their body slowed their organs way down. When someone dies, they aren't fully dead right away, which is why we can still donate our organs, right? So cryopreservation protects the cells and stores the patient until we have more advanced technology in the future. Once the doctors have declared legal death, which is what they have to wait for right now, they are hoping that this will change in the future. That's when Alcor can come in and begin their procedure. So they're doing this standby method where they're literally waiting for this person, like in their hospital room, to be declared legally dead. Then they start by putting the patient into an ice bath, making sure they cover them with ice and water, and they circulate the ice around the patient to expedite the cooling process. And they restart respiration and circulation because they have to give the patient medicine to protect their cells. So if you don't have that circulation in the body, the medicine won't go everywhere. This is very similar to what they do for donating organs. Then they take the body, or the patient, back to Scottsdale, where a surgeon opens up the chest, connects a pump and a chiller system to like the major blood vessels that are right there in the chest. And this system drains all the blood out of a patient, replaces it with the cryoprotectant solution. And this process takes about 4 to 5 hours. So they're basically putting antifreeze in your body. The patients can decide if they want to store their whole body or if they just want to store their brains. They store the bodies or brains in vessels at negative 196 degrees Celsius for decades, however long it takes. I mean, they've had one guy there literally since the 60s, so for as long as it needs. And they'll just stay there. They can't guarantee everyone will have a perfect cryopreservation because sometimes it just doesn't go as planned, as with anything, right? Sometimes the company isn't notified of a person's death until they have just been dead for too long. Or if an autopsy is required, then sometimes they can't necessarily cryopreserve them. In that case, they do still try to freeze the brains, but they don't know what the science will be in the future and if they can even reuse these brains. But I guess that's like the same gamble like everyone's taking. You never know if your brain's gonna come back or what, but you're hoping. We actually talked about this in the Disney's Frozen episode. In that episode, the basis is that they came out with the movie Frozen. That way, when you Google Disney's Frozen, it comes up with the movie instead of Walt Disney being cryopreserved. Either his brain, just his head. Some people say just his whole body. Just depends what source you look at. The patients are stored in vessels that aren't affected if the power goes out because they have liquid nitrogen in them and they refill this liquid nitrogen once a week. So a lot of people are like, well, you're in Scottsdale. Isn't it hot there? If the power goes out, how do you plan on keeping these people cryopreserved? So it actually doesn't take that much electricity. They got that liquid nitrogen in there. They're keeping them really cold and they can stay cold for a long time with that. The body procedure costs about $200,000 and the brain preservation is only about $80,000. And you can even cryopreserve your pets if you want to. And actually, a lot of times your life insurance can pay for it. Like the money that you get out will pay for it. Or people like the members, they're basically like paying a fee every month that they're paying towards their preservation. And then when they die, they'll be there to get preserved. The biggest question and the biggest gamble is, will medicine ever be advanced enough for these people to come back? Alcor is putting money into nanotechnology, which they think will be really important in the advancement of medical science. They are also working on regrowing tissue, such as organs. So this would be super helpful in bringing people back that died from not getting an organ transplant. Like you needed a lung, you didn't get a lung. If they can rebuild your like a lung for you, they can thaw you out, do the transplant, and then maybe you can live after that. But I have like so many questions about this. So many questions. Aren't they worried about what they're coming back to? Like, you don't know when you're going to come back. It's basically like whenever science is ready to advance technology that far, right? But look at how much life has changed in the last 10 years, let alone further than that. James Bedford, Dr. James Bedford, who was the first person to be cryopreserved, he's been preserved since the 60s. So coming back today, like that is a drastic change from the 1960s. I mean, it was the late 60s, but still, basically the 70s. Whatever. The 1970s and the 2020s are completely different. But I guess, I mean, that's the gamble you're taking. But also, you're probably coming back to nobody. Unless your whole family is cryopreserved. Who are you coming back to? Now you're coming back, you're completely alone. You don't recognize anyone or anything. You don't have a job, you don't have money, you don't have anywhere to go or a place to live. Then what? Now what? Right? I guess like maybe they're thinking we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But that should be something people are considering before they are cryopreserving their bodies. If a person decided to only save their brain, now what? Like, you don't have a body to go into. They can't just can they just take a body? Maybe they're going to take one of those bodies that was donated for science. They're going to put your brain in it. And now you're like a real boy again. I don't understand the situation. It's really sketchy to me. Or have you seen the show Download on Amazon, I think it is, where they like take your essence, I guess. I don't know if it's necessarily like a soul. And they upload you into a pretend AI world. Is that what they're going to do with these brains? Like, I don't know. Are they going to put you in a robot? I have so many questions. I guess probably the scariest question, the scariest thing to me is what happens if we really do beat death, right? What happens when this cryopreservation thing works and science has become so advanced that we can bring these people back and you can just live forever? Now what? I think maybe if we were there, it wouldn't be so scary, but thinking about it now, like we all know we're going to die. So there's almost like a beauty in that, I would say. Like you want to live your life a certain way because you know eventually you're not going to have a life anymore. Whereas if you are going to live forever, you would live your life differently. That's for sure. I don't know. There's a lot of questions there, but there it is. Cryonics, the human chop shop. That was a lot. There's a lot going on in Arizona. And there's even more actually. There's more things going on in Arizona, but I feel like those two really hit the nail right where we needed it to. Next week, my friends, I will be taking a break. Many of you probably already know, I have a separate side thing that I do, and this week we are doing a camp, so I will be busy with that, but I'll be back the week after that with another beautiful episode. So until then, my friends, stay skeptical, and I will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.